Hi there, Brian here, and welcome to today's video where I'll be looking into the Martini. So with this we'll be looking into the history, we'll be making the drink, and then we'll be trying the drink and discuss it. So first up, the history of the Martini. So the Martini is a cocktail that has been around for well over 125 years, so it has a lot of history behind it. So let's get started with the history. Okay, so the history of the Martini. Now the history of the Martini is really unclear because there are numerous accounts for its history, but the most common one would be that it evolved in the late 1800s and it evolved from a cocktail named the Martinez and was created in San Francisco at a hotel called the Occidental. So that one is one of the more popular theories, and like I say, from there it evolved because the modern day Martini is very different to the original recipe of the Martini. I believe the original recipe contained things like orange bitters and some other ingredients, not just your vermouth and your gin. And it wasn't as dry as the Martini is today. The original versions of the Martini had Old Tom gin, which is a sweeter gin, sweet vermouth rather than the dry vermouth, and like I say, other little bits included like your orange bitters. But over the years it has evolved into its more modern day form, which is the dry Martini being the more common one you see today. So as I was saying, it originated in the late 1800s, but it weren't until, and it grew in popularity, but it weren't until the 1930s where it started to see a real surge in popularity. That was when it was included in the Savoy Cocktail Book by Harry Craddock. I actually have a copy of that book right here, so I'll just put that there for you to see. A very good book if you want a good cocktail read. It's old, but you know, it's got a lot of history in there. So Harry Craddock introduced the Martini in this book, which was published sometime during the 1930s, and as I say, there it gained quite a bit of popularity. So the cocktail did lose a bit of popularity for a while before regaining it again in the 1950s. That was with its inclusion, or a variation of it, in the book Casino Royale by Ian Fleming, which is the first of the James Bond novels, which is where you get the famous line, "shaken not stirred," which is rubbish, to be fair. If you're doing a proper Martini, it shouldn't be shaken. Although the cocktail in question in the book isn't actually the classic Martini, it is a Vesper Martini, a variation on the Martini, because a Vesper Martini has vodka and gin, not just gin. A proper Martini is a gin cocktail. So yeah, with that being included in that book, obviously it took up in popularity because people wanted to try not only this Vesper Martini that's described in the book, but people also wanted to try the original, gaining popularity and making it one of the classics it is today. Like I say, it also gives you that whole, I like my Martini shaken not stirred. Shouldn't really be a thing, it's a stirred cocktail. But the Vesper Martini is a shaken cocktail. So after being included in the James Bond novel Casino Royale, it grew in popularity quite a lot because of the fact that every time you release a new James Bond book, that whole Martini shaken not stirred line is repeated in all his books. Then they started making the movies. Once again, that whole Martini shaken not stirred is repeated every single time. So you would get, obviously you get people who go watch this film, they come out of it, they think, I want to try that, I'll have one of them. So you would try the Vesper Martini shaken not stirred, but then people, curiosity gets you, what's the original? So you try the original as well. So it kept it popular for quite a while, but it did dip in popularity for a while. There was a point where it was considered a bit old-fashioned, maybe like the 1970s, early 1980s, but in the late 1980s and the 1990s, the Martini saw a huge resurgence in popularity, and with its resurgence in popularity, you get the more classic dry Martini which we have today, which is done with London Dry, and dry vermouth. Very different from the originals, which was done with an Old Tom gin and a sweet vermouth. So it's went from a sweet cocktail from its origins to a dry cocktail, the modern day version. You can still do the original version, it's still a martini because there's so many variations of the martini, and in the coming days, weeks, you will be seeing me do quite a few different variations of the martini, because you've got your classic dry, your wet, your naked, your 50-50, your back to front or reverse martini. You know, there are so many different versions, and that's just the classic. Then you've got your dirty, your filthy, your flavoured. So many different martinis. For me, I'm not a huge martini fan, although I do like a few of the variations. Porn star martini is rather nice. Espresso martini is really nice. But other than that, the classic version I'm not really a fan of myself. Not big on gin cocktails, if I must be honest. But we do have to try these things. So that is the history of the martini. It's a little bit cloudy, a little bit weird, because, as I say, it's an old cocktail and there are numerous people who have laid claim to being the creator of it over time. But that is a kind of more popularised version of how the martini came about. So, with the history being done, let's start getting into making of the dry martini. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to make a dry martini, a modern day classic dry martini. So for that, it's a very simple cocktail. All you're going to need is your dry vermouth and your dry gin. And for that, we have actually got some Martini extra dry vermouth here and some Gordon's London dry gin here. So when you're going to be making cocktails, technically you want to know what these ingredients taste like first before you actually make a cocktail, and because you're going to want to be picking out these flavours in your cocktail. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take a little bit of each of these, give them a little sip, see what we're looking for, then we're going to put the cocktail together and see what it's like. You might notice I've also got a bottle of Grey Goose here at the side here. That's because nowadays the classic dry martini, some people may ask for vodka instead of gin. Now, officially it is a gin cocktail, it should be made with gin, but because vodka is a rather popular spirit these days and some people prefer vodka over gin, people do want to change it out. You may be asked at the bar. Some bars may require you to actually ask the customer first, do you want it in with vodka or gin? So we're going to make it with both because I want to see what the difference is. So first things first, so let's get a little sip of each of these and see what we're looking for. Okay, so we have our alcohols here in these nice little liqueur glasses. So here we've got the London dry gin, so let's give the London dry gin a bit of a sniff and a taste. Yeah, you know, that's London dry gin, alright? So, London dry gin, it's very much very dry, yet the strong on the juniper and all those botanicals behind it. You know, a very complex drink. One of the ones technically you shouldn't be shaking because you bruise all those botanicals and you ruin the flavour. But let's get to the vermouth and see what that's like. So vermouth is something I've never actually tried on its own. I've had it in cocktails and stuff, but I've never actually tried it on its own. So let's give this a try. Not bad, not bad. It's got that grapey wine taste, but that just dryness of it is something I'm not a fan of. But right, so that's the actual alcohols tried. So let's get on to the actual making of the cocktail. Okay, so let's make the classic dry martini two ways, vodka and gin. So first thing we're going to need is glassware. So for that we have the martini glass and we've got some crushed ice so the glasses are chilling, Next you're going to need your mixing tins because it is a mixed cocktail, not shaken. So I've got a couple of them right here. So we're going to put them there. Now we're going to be wanting to add our ingredients. So for this cocktail, it is the classic dry martini. Now if you're going by most places, they'll go 75ml of dry gin to 15ml of vermouth. But officially, the IBA official recipe is 60-10. But we are going to be doing the regular version, that is the more common version, 75-15. So let's get into this. So first up, we want 75ml of your London dry gin, and we're just going to go 30 and 45. And now we're going to go for 15ml of our dry vermouth. And wash that out. Now we are going to do the vodka version. So we want 75ml of some vodka, and we've got Grey Goose here, so I'm going to be going 75ml of that. So we want 30 and 45. There we go. And finally 15ml of our dry vermouth. And there we have it. Right, so that's all the ingredients in the tins. Now we're just going to be wanting to add ice. So, ice added, now we're going to stir. New spoon for this one. Right, and then we're going to be wanting to discard the ice from these. So now we have two lovely chilled glasses, and we are just going to double strain into the glass. Okay, so we're going to double strain, and we're going to be using a julep strainer here and a mesh strainer. So we're going to be wanting, oh, a little splash there. There we go, there's that one. And we shall just wash these items quickly. And now we are going to double strain the vodka one into the glass. Okay, so there we have it, your two martinis. Which one was which? Let's have a sniff. That's vodka. Yeah. Okay, right, so the two martinis, vodka, gin. So what we need to do now is garnish them. Now the martini should be garnished with an espresso of lemon zest. So we will get that right now. So we'll express some lemon zest on. And then you might want to just go around the rim with a bit of that. We'll go around both of them there. And once down the stem on both. There we go. So that's that done. And there we have it. Two martinis. We're just going to garnish them. Finally, we're going to add a little bit of a lemon to the bit. And there we have it. Two martinis. So those are the martinis. What do they taste like? So we're going to start with the vodka one. No, we'll start with the gin one first. So, as I say, it's not a favourite of mine, but you can see why a lot of people like it. A lot of flavours in there. You get the you get that gin, you get the juniper from the gin, all those botanicals, but also mixed in with that dry grapiness from your vermouth. So yeah. Yeah, still not something I'm a huge fan of myself. But let's have a look at this one, the vodka one. So technically, maybe I should prefer the vodka, because as I'm not a huge fan of the gin, the whole juniper and all the botanicals you get in a gin, maybe I'll prefer a plainer version of the Martini. Yeah. So for me, I do prefer the vodka Martini, but out of the two, I wouldn't be drinking these personally myself. They're not something I like, but they are nice. I can see why they've stayed around for so long. Okay, so we've talked about the history, we've made the cocktails, we've tried the cocktails. Final thoughts on the cocktail is, well, it's not for me, but if you're a fan of London dry gin, I would say you're probably going to love this cocktail. But also if you're a fan of vermouth, you're going to like this cocktail as well, but probably more in the vodka versions, where the vermouth is a lot more noticeable, whereas in the one with the London dry gin, it has to compete with the juniper and all the botanicals you get from your London dry gin. So for me, I think I prefer the vodka version, just because I'm not a fan of London dry gin. But all in all, it's a very nice balanced cocktail, and it has been around for a long time. So, you know, although it's had its ups and downs in popularity, it has stayed the true course of time. So you've got to respect it for that. So at the end of the day, my opinion is they are nice cocktails. They're just not my kind of cocktail. But if I was going to choose one, I would choose a vodka Martini. Okay, so that is the end of this video, and that was the classic dry Martini. So, as always, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Take care and goodbye.